Hey everyone, today we're going to cover intro to GPT models for execs and business managers. And today I'm going to just cover the core ideas around how these work and why it's so difficult, or it's more difficult than you think, to get good results out of these if you try to build these on your own, and why it might actually not be a great idea. So there are 4 stages of the modeling, or 4 types of models that go into this. You might have heard a couple of terms like RLHF, which is reinforcement learning with human feedback. These are basically what ChatGPT-4 is built on, or ChatGPT is built on, and there are obviously 2 versions of it. But let's kind of walk you through how these are built and what makes it challenging to use for just generic purposes without having to do a lot of work that might be pretty costly, not only in terms of GPU compute cost, but also in terms of human cost of labor, which is labeling. All right, we'll start with the type of models. And next, we're going to look at the purpose of the model. And I'll add some notes and use cases. Now, if you think about how these get done, the first component is pre-training model. And one other thing I want to include is inputs and what it takes, compute, cost. And when you build a pre-training model, the purpose is and there's a word that's used called token, but I'm going to just call it word completion. And what this does is it takes a bunch of data that is in the form of millions, if not trillions, of words and sentences, blurbs or blobs of sentences, and these could include Wikipedia, books, blogs, tons of internet data, open internet data. And what it's doing is it can read any sentence and can predict the next word. The compute costs here are super high because you're using a lot of GPUs, and currently $1 to $5 million is kind of a general cost number I've seen out in the market. But this is where majority of the hard work of building a base model is done. And so in pre-trained models are also called base models. Now, this is actually pretty much what you're going to see out there today. There's GPT-2 out there. There are a couple of open source models out there, such as Llama and Vicuña. Probably not spelling it correctly, but these are the examples. What these base models are good at, they're good at these word completions, but they're generally going to give you very garbage results because they've not been fine-tuned to do anything meaningful. Where I would typically use it is used for, I think, idea generation, where you're looking for lots of options. For example, give me 30 options for names for a dog or a cat or a pet. That would be a potential type of a use case. But if you ask it for a very specific ask on how do I complete a certain task, this is not your model, because what happens from the pre-training phase, you go into this phase which is called fine-tuning, which you take this base model and then you start to make it a little bit better. And there are different stages you can take that through. So fine-tuning means you take the base model and you make it better. And the very first stage typically is supervised fine-tuning. Supervised fine-tuning means you take a bunch of example prompts and answers, and teach the model what the right answers are. So here what you're doing is you're enabling a newer model, and which is supervised fine-tuning, also sometimes called SFT models. and giving this base model some examples of how you would actually go about answering questions. If you took a base model and you just tried to ask it a question, it will probably return back another question because it doesn't quite understand. It just does word completion and it doesn't quite understand that it's supposed to answer your question. So what supervised fine-tuning model does is gives it a bunch of questions and answers and teaches it what the methodology should be on coming up with a final result. And what's interesting is that this is actually not that expensive. You can still use some amount of GPUs, 1 to 100 GPUs to do this. Inputs here are these example questions and answers, and then you get a model that is supervised fine-tuning. Now, the big issue here is you still don't know if your answers are good or bad. You know that you're going to get a question-answer type format, but quality of answers is missing. So how do you address that problem? So you can go from here to something called a reward modeling function. And reward modeling is not only now taking these questions and answers, but asking it a bunch of questions, seeing number of answers, and humans review them and give it score. Which we should go back to this. We should go back to the supervised fine-tuning model. Another thing that happens is humans are doing this part. Provide examples, and this is obviously pretty expensive. And today, being done by a lot of generic contractors, these companies such as OpenAI or Facebook might hire. But eventually, maybe we have specialists do this that get paid for that. So then, now what you get is a reward model where you have a bunch of a model that's been more that's gone beyond not just giving it examples, but ranking the examples. And then you can go one step further and turn it into a reinforcement learning algorithm where you've taken these scores and it takes these scores, quality of scores, and comes up with a policy that generates best answers. So, the cost of doing these is about the same, 1 to 100 GPUs going forward, because this is actually pretty cheap compared to building the base model. But as a result, what you get is you have a pre-training model all the way out to a reinforcement learning model. Now this model has generally very high quality answers. And can be trained to, can be given a lot of generic tasks where it includes reasoning as well. In one of the next videos, I'm going to cover what some of the use cases might be. But the key takeaway for this is that this RLHF type model is not just the base model, but a lot of work goes into training these models to be actually more competent and answering these questions. And it requires a ton of this human feedback and human feedback mechanism that's built in. And that's not as easy to replicate. You'll see that OpenAI is doing quite a bit of work in trying to figure out how to enable the fine tuning. They'll provide you with the base model, but then they'll provide your developers the capability to fine tune a model. So we'll see how that evolves. I do want to say that I built this part of the video, and I'll give credit to Andrej Karpathi, whose talk at Build Summit was some of the inspiration around this. So hopefully this was somewhat easy to understand, high-level overview of how ChatGPT or GPT models work. Thank you.